All right, glad to have you back. Now, although the price of diesel, otherwise known as automotive gas oil, has long been deregulated, meaning that marketers have the right to fix price according to market forces. But the recent hike in the price of diesel has continued to skyrocket, causing a ripple effect on the economy from manufacturing giants through the medium-sized enterprises to small-scale organizations. A sudden rise in the price of diesel, the fuel that powers a large part of the industrial and commercial activities in the country, is currently threatening its ability to produce goods and services as the nation battles the scourge of the hike in the price of the products. Now, the impact of the price hike, if not addressed, or if something is not done, will no doubt lead to an escalation in production and operation costs of manufacturers, mounting inflationary pressures, eroding profit margins, and risk to business continuity, especially for SMEs in the rail sector. It will interest you to know that the price of diesel rose from 300 naira at the beginning of the year to over 700 naira per litre, putting the cost beyond the reach of producers. Well, and of course, users. To discuss this, I introduced him earlier. He's joining me via Skype. He's the investment research analyst at United Capital PLC, Mr. Ayorinde Akinloye. Good afternoon, Mr. Akinloye. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me on the show again today. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, then. It's sad. From 300 naira to about 700 naira and more than in some cases. You are the investment researcher here, the professional here. Now, what percentage are we looking at what this means and what impact would it have? Let's be straight up and know how this will even affect profit margin and businesses. Telecommunication companies and even media houses like us are already complaining.
Yes, definitely. This definitely is going to have a lot of ripple effect for all businesses generally, because I think basically what we can describe this as is we're basically paying the price for not having an efficient power sector. Assuming we have efficient power generation, efficient power transmission, and efficient power distribution, then there wouldn't be any heavy reliance on the use of alternative fuels like diesel, alternative energy sources, like diesel to power businesses and engage in all our economic activities, right? But clearly, we're an economy that is very dependent. In fact, for most businesses, they spend more on diesel consumption than even payments to PHCN to the discos for their power or energy consumption on a monthly basis. So yes, definitely these are significant impacts to look forward to. First is the obvious one, higher energy costs. This is going to be largely heavy for small and medium scale enterprises who are not able to afford other alternative sources. So what I mean is, for large industrial firms, for example, the likes of Dangote Cement, big cement players, that's about Dangote Cement, Lafarge. When you talk about also some of the food producers like maybe flour mills, Dangote Sugar, Boa, Dufil, all these big popular food companies, they have the initial capital needed to sort of invest in alternative power sources, right? So they're able to get energy from gas and other thermal plants and coal and other energy sources that they can use. So they have opportunity to diversify across board such that they are able to limit the impact of the increase in price of diesel. And regardless anyway, as people are trying to move away from using diesel, those are these large industrial users, as they are moving to trying to use other sources, right? These other sources, their prices are also going up because everything again still finds roots in crude oil and gas, both of which have become very expensive in recent months, right? So the first key thing is higher energy costs for all the businesses. It will be very much pronounced for small and medium enterprises who, they have a smaller revenue base to be able to absorb this high energy cost, and it's going to be a significant concern going forward if we continue to see prices remain at this level. The second thing also is, energy cost is just one of, it's just a component of production costs for so many of all these businesses, right? And other running expenses, overheads, and the like. So we are likely to see higher production costs for manufacturing businesses and industrial businesses. We are likely to see higher overhead costs for all different businesses in terms of where they are running their operations and all. So those are two key things also. And overall, what you now see is, as a manufacturer, as a producer, once my cost of production is higher, once my overhead is higher, I definitely need to find a way to pass that cost on to the final consumers, right? And that is where we now expect to see in the coming months how the ripple effect of this higher energy cost will begin to tell on, services, on price of food items and other commodities that are consumed within the country, right? We will now begin to see a bigger ripple effect across all other commodity classes. So that's going to be another derivative, another consequence of these higher diesel prices that we are seeing. Not to even include the impact on day-to-day life of Nigerian citizens, particularly for those who have to rely on 24/7 generator to be able to power their homes and houses, particularly for serviced apartments and the like. So these are key concerns also to look out for. But overall, the first key thing is energy costs for running business will be higher, both from a production side and overhead side. Production cost as a whole is going to be significantly higher, and then we would begin to now see ripple effects on prices of the commodities produced by these businesses and prices of other commodities other commodities across the economy. So it's basically going to be a ripple impact of significant inflation as we continue to go forward and go into the year. Now, in terms of the impact on their margins, it's going to be very much dependent on the pricing power the company has, right? So, for example, we know in the cement industry, most of the cement players actually have very strong pricing power. So once there's any increase in their cost, it's very easy for them to pass on the cost to consumers, right? Which is why we've seen cement prices have always continued to go up every time. It is because cement prices are almost deregulated, in the sense that once there's any increase in the cost of production for the producers, they pass on the cost to consumers, and as a result, they've been able to defend their margins over time. But for some other sensitive sectors, like in the food sector, in the personal care sector, and these other sectors that also use a lot of energy in terms of the industrial production, some of them don't have that strong pricing power, right? So what eventually happens is, by the time they have to factor that into their cost, they may not be able to increase price enough to pass on the entire cost to the consumers. So for some, they would have to split it, bear some of the costs and take a hit to their margins. For some, they will not even be able to increase prices at all, and basically their margins would have to absorb everything. So it's going to be very much dependent on the pricing power of the company concerned. So that's going to be a significant determination of what would happen to the margins of different listed companies on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and even for other non-listed companies in Nigeria. So basically, that's going to be the big determinant: the ability to pass on those prices to consumers.
Great stuff there. Very good way to really break down this conversation, let everyone understand it. Now, but let me follow up. I don't know if you're a fan of deregulation, but if you are, what do you think with what is happening with diesel? I've asked these questions with many, even the oil and gas experts and all of that. But you are a professional finance person. What are you thinking? What is running through your mind with the fact that crude is about $120 at a point $130, and today we are buying diesel at more than 700 naira? What do you think would happen if we open up the downstream of the petroleum industry?
I will speak from a macroeconomic policy point of view. Clearly, it's really difficult to justify deregulation to an average Nigerian, like to the Nigerian on the street, who is not aware of all the economic jargons, and we talk about deregulation and things like that, right? So it's really sometimes it could be difficult to justify, why should you deregulate to make prices higher and make life more comfortable for me? But the truth is, Nigeria, the way we manage the downstream petroleum sector is totally different from what obtains across the globe. There are some things that are being subsidized such that they should not be. So I'll give example, right? Typically, when you look at countries like maybe the US, United Kingdom and the likes, they have efficient transport systems. So not everybody, intends to maybe own a car. Even for those who have cars, they don't drive every day. They don't drive to work every day. Why? Because they are older, efficient transport network, right? And poor prices basically reflect what is happening in the crude oil market. If crude oil prices are higher, then fuel prices will be higher. And as a result of that, people are not really big on driving their own cars because of the cost of gas, to power their vehicles, right? So bringing it down to bringing it to Nigeria, a liter of petrol, for example, is about 165 naira. In most cases across the globe, on average, you would have it anywhere between 500 to 600 naira a liter. That's the price of petrol, basically across the globe, depending on which country you're looking at. So, is deregulation what we need? Yes, deregulation is important in order to ensure that these products are always available. The reason is because if we have to continue to pay subsidies, it means that NNPC is going to be a key player in importing petroleum products into Nigeria, because there is not enough FX for other players to be able to actually import petroleum products into the country, right? So NNPC takes on the burden, and whenever it is unable to afford importation of these products, then that creates a scarcity in the country, within the country, right? And we would always go through that cycle of having, petroleum product scarcity, either from diesel or petrol or across all these other products, right? We will continue to have these problems until we allow the sector to be opened up and we allow so many other different players to come in, such that it's not just the NNPC, other players in the downstream space, Total, Mobil, Adova, and every downstream company that you can think of, they are able to play within that space. They are able to import. For those who deal at the depot level, Capital Oil and the likes, they are able to import, and they are also able to sell at market reflective prices. This is what will encourage investments within the downstream oil and gas space. So deregulation is an extremely important topic from a product availability point of view and efficiency of the supply chain. Also, it is also not justifiable for the government to continue to finance subsidy. Last week, NNPC reported that it's going to be paying about 250 billion naira for fuel subsidy for the month of March. That's going to be deducted before they make any remittance to the Federation account. But one thing we've noticed, if you look at NNPC's financials, their monthly financial updates, they've not been able to remit. They've literally not been able to remit anything to the Federation accounts for a while now. We've had months where they've not remitted anything. We've had months when they've remitted almost next to nothing really into the Federation accounts, because what it means is what they are earning from crude oil, from exporting crude oil, they are basically using to subsidize PMS. Not to talk of even now have to subsidize products like diesel, products like jet fuel and the likes. There's going to be too much pressure on the federal government to subsidize these products. Annually, we are going to be on petrol subsidy. We are projected to spend well over 3 trillion naira on petrol subsidy this year alone. The highest we've ever done in revenue in Nigeria in the past 20 years is about 5 trillion. So if you take out 3 trillion subsidy payments, remember that we still have a very huge debt service a huge debt stock to continue to service every year. All this put together puts the government in a very precarious fiscal position. So the government cannot continue to afford subsidizing petrol. If rich economies, rich governments like the US, the UK, even some other African countries that are not necessarily as rich as Nigeria, if they are unable to continue to subsidize petroleum products, then there is no justification for the Nigerian government to continue to subsidize petroleum products from a fiscal policy point of view, right? Yes, from the consumer, from the poverty point of view, it is really difficult to justify that to the average Nigerian. But as a country, we cannot afford continued subsidy on all these items, and there's a need for us to take that away and relieve the federal government of that pressure. Let these products trade at the prices at which they should trade at, and let people who can afford to use these services, let people who can really afford to drive a car and continue to follow a car, make use of a car. Otherwise we invest in other transportation means that would be affordable to other citizens, for them to be able to commute from wherever they need to go to anywhere they, back and forth for their transportation needs, right? So it is necessary for us to take out that subsidy in order to preserve the finances of the federal government. Otherwise, in no time, the federal government may not even be able to have enough capital to finance recurrent spending, payment of salaries, and even other capital projects that they need to do. So those are the three key areas where we need to consider when looking at the subsidy discussion.
So, a very brilliant submission from you, I must confess. But let's wrap up on this note. We've had projections for 2022 earlier, and all of this coupled with the global issues, are we going to talk about reprojections? All of this, some of the figures might not just be as expected. Now, what's your outlook for the entire space as we move on in 2022? Particularly impacts on businesses. How do you see businesses faring throughout the year?
Okay, for the rest of the year, I think the operating environment for businesses is actually going to remain very, very tough. We expect it to continue to remain quite hostile. First, we look at it from the aspect of the cost of running a business. We expect energy costs to continue to remain elevated. There is not really any downside risk to crude oil prices at this point in time. We think cost of energy will remain very much elevated, both for service-based businesses and for production or industrial-based businesses, right? When that happens, we expect that other products will be affected in terms of raw material. For example, particularly industrial companies, we are going to be looking at countries when with Russia and Ukraine still in this current crisis, and with the likelihood that this is going to be prolonged for quite a while. We are not yet sure on the peace talks and ceasefire agreements that have been negotiated. It's still unclear how soon that will come to fruition, but we are looking at a scenario whereby this crisis remains for a while to come. What that does is it's going to impact cost of importing raw materials, because if you recall, Russia and Ukraine, a combination of those two countries, they play a significant part in some key raw materials. For example, wheat imports, metal and aluminium imports. All these items are critical raw materials for some of our activities, even for machinery, of which even from other countries, we import machineries from them, plants and machineries from them. But these countries also import metal products and metal ores and steel, aluminium from Russia, right? So once all these raw material costs are higher, it means the cost of importing all these machineries, importing raw materials become very expensive. So from a cost point of view, businesses need to brace up for a very hostile cost environment as we go into the year. So it's very important for businesses across Nigeria now to begin to map out ways in which they are going to ensure they are able to run efficiently and try to minimize and control their costs between now and the end of the year. Maybe towards the end of the year, Q3, Q4, maybe gradually we may by chance. But for now, we don't see any likelihood of these pressures easing. But maybe as we go into the year, if there are more positive developments, then we could see a chance where some of these cost pressures will begin to dissipate. But from where we sit right now, looking at all the numbers and all the variables and factors available to us today from where we sit, we think the cost of running businesses, at least in 2022, is going to be significantly higher. Again, what you would likely see is with this higher cost, the federal government, the monetary policy, of which there will be a monetary policy committee briefing later today, we will likely see a situation whereby maybe later in the year, if not necessarily at today's meeting, but later in the year, there might be a situation whereby they may have to increase interest rates in order to sort of cool the inflationary pressures we are seeing, right? And from there, we could begin to see interest rates, meaning cost of financing loans and other things will also become very high for businesses. So it's really not looking all that bright as we go into the rest of the year.
I must thank you, Mr. Ayorinde Akinloye, the investment research analyst at United Capital PLC. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.